I'm going to call the September 8th, 2025 Transportation Advisory Board meeting study session. Can we do a call to order? And then a roll call?
This is technically okay if there's only 3 of us?
Well, it's a study session, so we're not doing something.
We're not making any decisions or.
All right. So we can do a roll call.
Of course. Chair Kalkoffer?
Here.
Board Member Starrett?
Here.
Board Member Wickland?
Here.
Vice Chair McKee Burrows, maybe running late. Board Member McInerney has said he's not going to be here. Council Member Yarborough, I did not hear from.
All right. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous people. We honor the history and the living and the spiritual connection that the first people have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustice that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. Great. Communication from staff.
There are none.
Can we do introductions for the new faces?
Sure.
Great.
We'll start at one end and work our way down.
Perfect.
Hi, good to see you all. Kaylee Fallon, Transportation Planner.
Good evening, Jim Angstadt, Director of Engineering Services.
Hello, Kenny Ensign, Transportation Planning Manager.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Kyle Howard, Traffic Engineering Administrator.
Hi, I'm Jen Newton. I'm the new Assistant City Manager over External.
Caroline Michael, Civil Engineer 1 in Traffic.
Hi, I'm Daniela Needson. I'm also Civil Engineer 1 in Traffic.
Great. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, I'm Ben Ortiz, Transportation Planner.
Perfect. Any other communication from staff?
No.
No. Public invited to be heard. I don't think anybody's here, but we do have something that came in online. So I'm going to read something that we got from Connie Carter. She said she lives in Longmont for 46 years. Recently had been looking for a way to connect online, preferably with the city government, in order to ask a question. Are there any plans afoot to add full fixed route bus service between Longmont and DIA, also DEN, in the near future? I hope so, but if not, I would like to urge for the implementation as soon as possible. Now that 8 Black Shuttle has gone out of business, taking all of its prepaid shuttle vouchers dollars with it, the situation is dire. But while they're in operation, the prices that they charged were too steep for many, perhaps even most Longmont residents. She said that her daughter lives in DC and comes here regularly and travel between Longmont and DEN. She has taken the RTD Boulder Airport bus, and she would drive down to Broomfield to go intercept her. This would take her 1 hour round trip, which was already an overburden on the local roads. When it wasn't possible for her to pick her up from that RTD station in Broomfield, her daughter would have to take the bus to the Boulder terminal and then take the Bolt from Boulder to Longmont, which was an awfully long trip, usually about 2 hours plus waiting time for 2 buses. Every time they go through that rigmarole, I reflect on how inefficient it is and how ridiculous that we don't have a direct bus service between the city as large as Longmont and the airport that serves us. To close, think of all the Longmont residents on the roads to and from DIA and to the Boulder airport bus stops, each car adding to the overall congestion and air pollution that plagues us all. It's something that she believes is an easy fix and long overdue, and that Longmont needs to have its own airport bus service. I echo what she says. My wife is actually driving to the airport right now because she can't take a bus. So I echo what Connie says, and we really appreciate when we hear from the public. So thank you very much, Connie. Okay, so if there's no other public to be heard, then we will move on to the study session items. And then I think first up is the Strokes presentation.
Good evening, cab members, Chair Kalkoffer. Tonight we have, as part of the study session, a discussion on Strodes. We have a short presentation, maybe about 8 or 10 slides, some pictures, some ideas. I also printed out some small scale graphics, 2 copies of each of some examples we have in Longmont, and then one in Wisconsin that I found that might be categorized as a strode. And so after the presentation, any questions, we can break into groups or just generally lay them out on the table. Got some stickies, and if you left me any pens, we have a few pens you can write with, and just make up some notes, things to look at, and then we can have some discussion and close.
Great.
So, what is a strode? It is generally defined, you grab it from the website and the internet, as a hybrid of a street and a road. It's designed to move cars quickly, similar to a road, but also to provide access to businesses and homes like a street. The problem? The strodes fail at both. It is safety issues, unsafe for both pedestrians and bicycles. Most strodes tend to be 5, 6, 7 lanes of roadway or more. And due to the number of driveways, it is inefficient for cars and trucks. So some of those characteristics are wide lanes, higher speed limits, higher vehicle volumes, frequent driveways and intersections, and then poor or non-existent pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. The challenge usually is, because of the wider roads and wider lanes and high volumes, is how do you cross safely? So in Longmont, why are strodes a problem? As we indicated, high crash rates, some poor walkability, inefficient land use, and a low return on public investment. So we threw in our heat map that we have been building from, I think it's from the TMP, that kind of shows the areas of high accidents from the high accident or high incident, high crash network. Thank you. Just an example of, you'll see some of these, I pulled some of these locations as some of the examples of Main Street, both north and south. Looking at, another example is, I pulled in an example on, I believe, 17th, and then one on 3rd as well. So, what can be done about strodes? One of the strategies is access management. If you have better intersection design, fewer driveways, improved visibility, that can make for a better roadway. Complete street redesign, narrow your lanes up, adding more landscaping, providing protected crossings, improving sidewalks, reducing speed limits. Road diets are an example of some of that. And then, as well as the surrounding area, strodes are driven by fast-paced development in suburban areas to provide more commercial development to support some of those suburban areas. And so zoning reform is critical as well to encourage mixed use and walkable development. So in Longmont, some of the examples that staff has identified are along Main Street in some areas, Hover Street, Ken Pratt Boulevard to a lesser extent, because that is more of a boulevard and highway, although there are some of the strode ideas are there. Nelson Road, 17th Avenue. So some questions to consider as we look at this and discuss the issue is, so which streets in Longmont would you consider to be falling into that strode category? And then also, as we start talking about what takeaways we want, what should be done about strodes in Longmont? So one of the things, even though we've been listed as a bullet point, is using the example of Main Street. Main Street, I very easily south of of the road, St. Vrain Creek, and then north in the northern area of the city certainly meets that definition of stroke. Okay? But the city, in moving things forward, the city has, as part of the Main Street Corridor Plan, has indicated that in that document that access management is crucial to provide safety and to improve both flows of traffic for pedestrian and multimodal. It doesn't give us any plan or outline of how to go about that, but as part of the staff, most of who sit and do development review, are part of the development review committee, those are items we look at when new developments come forward, or redevelopment in some areas. We usually look at access points, and if a development if they are doing a certain level of development, we will begin to restrict their access, either closing access on Main Street entirely or requiring them to provide right-in, right-outs. Some of the other improvements on Main Street have been CDOT has instituted a number of projects to install medians in the center of Main Street so that there are not, to limit usually accidents, in most cases one most recently at 17th, and then south of 119, just south of 119, they closed off, provided a median that restricted left turns. Accidents, few years ago, accidents have been significantly reduced on those types of accidents. City code currently, most of the roads we're talking about as roads are arterial roadways. Higher speeds, in some cases, Main Street's kind of the 25 to 35, not necessarily a high-speed road, but others over 119 certainly. City code does not permit private access onto arterials. That was added into city code. So when we have developments, more likely there'll be a city street that is to provide access for the development, but not private access points. So that is one, as we plan better for the city. Those are some strategies we use to help, so that we're not creating stroads in the future. But I'll run it back to questions and open it up to anything for now before we start looking at some plans.
I have a question. Do curb cuts, the more curb cuts there are, does that increase the road being a stroad, or does that have nothing to do with one another?
It follows, it adds to more conflict points and makes the road less safe. And that what is one of the items in a stroad that have led it to be defined as a stroad. And it's not an official definition. It's what you can see out there.
Sure.
But it's all of those things: width of road, width of number of lanes, speed of road, the type of road. So, and in some cases, and the one example I'll show you is that why it kind of falls under stroad is there's only sidewalk on one side. So it doesn't provide the dynamic of traffic, and what we do about it is changing. In Longmont and nationwide, too many accidents. Okay, we see it historically over the last few years, more pedestrian accidents, more bicycles being hit. So, some of the strategies to help bring those numbers down is to provide better facilities, whether it's protected bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, additional areas for pedestrians to walk outside of the corridor of where traffic traditionally has travels.
And how does that change the road diet? How does that change the throughput?
So road diets not necessarily will change that, attack that aspect more than mean the driveways, but it can reduce the road, it provides better pedestrian crossings because it reduces the areas of conflict. Okay, so an example I'll use is, and one we're still working on, is Sunset, which was in the past was a 4-lane corridor, 2 lanes in each direction. Okay, we took out one of those lanes in each direction, provided a center turn lane, and provided bike lanes on the outside. So road diets can, within certain limits, depending on the capacity of the roadway. We don't recommend road diets, and it's not recommended for when you have more than 20,000 trips on a roadway, because there's just too much traffic. But in a lot of our city streets, we look at that as part of our strategies. Usually it's currently being driven through our pavement management program, where we're working on a roadway, or we're going to repave a roadway, we start looking at how do we provide Vision Zero kind of components into that roadway. Okay, how do we provide more bike facilities? And so it's a slow process, and that can be done with the limited funding we have. So we're actually working on next year's kind of proposals for which roads to look at, how to provide crossings, areas around schools, we're always looking at that, how to provide that kind of better avenue so that we can still move cars in a safe manner, but provide protected facilities for bikes and pedestrians.
Great, thank you.
Can I add something real quick? Cammy Edson, transportation planning, and that's why some communities are moving away from using the term road diets for this exact reason, adopting the language of road reconfiguration to be able to get away from some of those definitions when they know there's a better potential layout instead of having those metrics be constraining to what they want to do. So less and less use of the term road diet, maybe more and more use of road reconfiguration.
Are we just going to go on?
Sure.
Oh, okay. You didn't say one.
No, there's no button.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I need to get questioned first. Well, I mean, Vision Zero is pretty clear that we want to reduce the number of collisions and impacts to the most vulnerable users. So it makes sense to me that we have full separation instead of having things like a bike lane. It doesn't provide really any separation other than a line on the road. So if we really want to be moving that direction, then it needs to be taken like as a first step. Instead of going, oh, we'll just add a bike lane when we can, it needs to be like, okay, we're going to add this extra area for pedestrians and for bikes to have full separation so there isn't those conflicts anymore. So that would be my comment. So
Is Kaufman the example of how we're going to move forward? We're having the road, a busway, sidewalk, and then bicycle lane. Is that a standard that we're looking for more of our roads in the future?
I don't have an answer for that as to what the future will hold. I think individual corridors will present different individual sections for those.
Okay.
So it just depends on, first and foremost, it's going to be budget. Second, it's going to be right away, which is tied to budget. It depends on the corridor. It depends on the needs of that corridor.
yeah, it would be nice if we had Kaufman everywhere. So I guess following on from Alice's question, what would it take in terms of budget to make that type of roadway look a common view in Longmont so that it's every road or most of our roads are following that model?
We haven't done that analysis to what it would take. Keeping in mind that Kaufman is it's more than a local street, it's basically a collector. So that cost about $1 million a block.
Okay.
Okay, for that. Actually,
higher.
actually it's $2 million.
Yeah.
So my apologies. It started in $2 million a block. We have about 140 miles of collectors and arterials in our city. So that would be and
Add that up.
rather expensive. But that doesn't mean that you focus on certain corridors to move people safely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and some of those can be on local city streets. The challenge with protected bike lanes, similar to what we did on Kaufman as separate lanes, is that a lot of areas in Longmont were built to older standards. And some of the examples we'll see when we talk about driveways on Stroads is there's a lot of local driveways on some of our bigger arterials. And it would be it's very challenging to kind of provide that because you're going to see a lot of gaps if you have protected bike lanes. So we're focusing on some improvements where we're pushing transportation corridors where we won't have those access. And some of those are some of the newer developments in the 80s and 90s. An example would be, what was the road we were talking about today? 21st Street west of Hover. It's a 3-lane section.
Becomes Northwestern.
Becomes Northwestern. Yeah, it's a 3-lane section, but very few trips on it. But there's the streets that access it are local city streets. That would be an example of an area where we could maybe provide protected bike lanes. An example, another one would be 17th Avenue, okay, west of Hover as well. We'd have to look to see if the trips generated on that road will meet the criteria, but that would be an example. If you look at a similar stroad or a similar arterial, 9th Avenue, just west of or east of Main Street, it's got a lot of driveways on it. Wouldn't be a good candidate. We're still working to see how to define those standards and then see how that would come out. So that would be work we're looking at in 26. So when I say stay tuned, we'll bring it forward.
And I'll add a lot of what we hope to come out of the Vision Zero action plan is going to have those details where, like, what is it going to cost to take the systemic approach to some of these things, like protective versus what are those hotspot locations where we need to do it. And the TMP, I mean, it had protected bike lanes named for the first time, I think, in city history. It wasn't ever in a plan before, so at least it's there now on those prioritized corridors in some places. So aligning it with the safety work, getting those numbers so we can start having those conversations of beyond, it's gonna cost a lot of money, because that's a conversation, like we can't just say that for forever. We're gonna have the budget talks at some point. We're gonna have to resource differently at some point. So I think hopefully coming out of the Vision Zero action plan will not only be those specific projects, but how do we begin to really tackle and what kind of money are we talking about at that systemic level to make some of these changes happen.
Do we know how much money is set aside for Vision Zero improvements, or do we have to come up with a plan first and then go back to City Council and propose the changes?
It's kind of both, I think, right now, right? Yeah, so there is budget for Vision Zero right now but kind of planning dollars and maybe some quick win dollars, but then the Vision Zero action plan will help guide what does the budget need to start looking like.
So depending on what we look at in Vision Zero, in TRP 11, which is our transportation system management budget, we program in, I think I've got about 300,000 dedicated for Vision Zero improvements for 26. And then as we move out in future years, I think we've tried to ramp that up as we get the action plan approved. Not having any particular projects in mind, but maintaining that kind of pots of money each year in a 5-year plan that is always subject to change. And there's other dollars for neighborhood mitigation that we've put in there for traffic mitigation separately from Vision Zero dollars. So traditionally we have had in TRP 11, we've had some larger capital projects in there. We are getting away from those into the future. We're starting in 26, and we'll see that laid out to basically be about transportation management and not larger capital projects.
Thanks.
But right now, those costs are covering the planning and the grant matches.
Sure.
It's not necessarily enough to cover project costs at this point.
Sure.
Just to clarify.
Thanks.
I would say 9th is one of another street for sure. But it sounds like it's going to be very challenging to make any changes about with the driveways. But to answer your question, which streets, other streets, 9th would be definitely another street, I would think.
Well, I always think there are creative solutions to 9th. Center turn lane, narrowing to potentially restricting access to various neighborhood streets so that you're required to go to an actual collector to then get to the neighborhood, makes the neighborhood quieter. So there are options, always. But it's just a matter of creativity. I think for Strodes, I want to kind of hear from you guys is so like Kaufman is redone. Would you call that a street or a road? Just like when we're talking about Strodes.
Yeah.
So like we created a street that's going to be more economically viable for the city. I see great development opportunity, and that's where I want to get to the discussion about Strodes is, all right, Hover, what do we want it to be? Do we want it to be an economic zone, or do we want to just move people? And then how do we, if it's a road, how do we move it to also be safe for the most vulnerable, as the TNP demands that we change the paradigm? So how do we get a pedestrian or a wheelchair user across Hover? And I've heard stories of, a blind person trying to get to work at Home Depot. How do we provide services for the most vulnerable instead of, like what is going on Hover right now is there is an extra turn lane that's being extended. There's going to be another light, so now we're going to just create more platoons of vehicles. So what are we doing for pedestrians or bikes or other people that do not have the luxury?
Yeah, I would say Kaufman is a good example of what is kind of anti-Strode, is it has a defined purpose. So Kaufman was designed and built for bus transit and as well as pedestrians and bicyclists to travel through the area, since we have Main Street that is very car heavy as being a US highway. So that side of Kaufman is the ideal place for a bicyclist to travel that portion of the city in a low stress environment that's protected. And then the infrastructure around it was catered to move pedestrians and bicyclists with the primary objective of having the buses on that route. Cars are kind of secondary to that route, and we're providing that primary route for cars through Main Street, as well as other streets. So when we're talking about streets and roads, that's the problem with Strode, is it does both, but not graded either.
Right.
Kaufman is very directed of, it has a defined purpose of moving other modes of transportation besides just cars or single-on vehicles.
Right. And I would say from the city's investment, now we're going to get a return on our investment by various developers and economic advantage along Kaufman, as I've already heard from various property owners along Kaufman. So if we think of it in those terms of investments, where instead we have Strodes that might cost too much money now because it doesn't do anything well for commercial activity or safety or promoting development for housing, to get people closer to those commercial opportunities. So how can we, that's where zoning reform changes, but you probably got to talk to planning and zoning, not us.
Planning and zoning, I don't know if we've been informed about the economic changes in the area, but I mean, as far as just a comfortability standpoint, there's been a lot of praise in the design and just how nice it is to walk in the area, just away from louder vehicles. You generally get a more relaxed driver going through there because they're driving with more purpose of finding a destination, not driving through the city. And Kaufman's a great example of maybe that's kind of the ideal world, but we're taking a lot of things we've learned from that project and we'll be applying it to future Vision Zero projects. So you might not see the full build out, but there'll be a lot of design elements that we've learned from that project and bring to other areas in the city.
Okay, so then now if we wanted to turn Hover into a road, according to, we're talking about Strodes, where street and road hybrid, and we need to choose which one it should be. A Strode doesn't do any of it well. So that's what I'm trying to clarify. So a road just moving people via vehicles, how do we get a vulnerable user across that street who can't drive?
Yeah, so...
What kind of standards can we maybe start implementing? So does that mean underpasses? Does that mean center refuge islands, but then with lights that are going to shut down traffic because a road is also way too fast?
Yeah, and that's stuff we've kind of in the background and haven't quite seen with our new traffic signal project. We've been actually retiming a lot of the lights. So we've actually increased a lot of the yellow times to the modern standard as well as red clearance times. And as far as pedestrian crossing times, we've actually recalculated those distances and have increased them across the board. And at a lot of major intersections, most of them, you will see a lead pedestrian interval. So they'll actually hold traffic for all red while pedestrian gets a head start. And we've actually seen a lot of improvements there. A little bit, people don't understand that the lots of lanes go, they're kind of conditioned to see the green light. But along with our new technology upgrades, we're collecting more data to seeing where people cross, how many times they cross. So we get volume counts of people, bicyclists, as they use our crosswalks, and as well as our driving lanes, so we can make those decisions of where are people going, and if we provide new routes, so let's just say Hover, we don't decide that's going to be a future, say bike route. How can we get people across those areas using our existing infrastructure that are more low stress roads? Like Gate Street's a good example of Vision Zero road that's already designated as a bikeway. It's a collector. How can we provide improvements to that area? They get a travel route for bicyclists to get across the city to avoid taking Main Street, to avoid taking Hover in a low stress environment, and then providing those east-west connections.
Right. But then everyone has to get to a grocery store.
Yeah.
So, that's where our grocery stores are generally on Stroads. So, we still have to think about how to move a bike or someone walking to get basic needs.
Yep. And part of that is consolidating the access points for even bicyclists, where they're coming from, so we can give them a low stress environment and then funnel them naturally into an area that we can focus on safety improvements going across the road. So that's an underpass, but that's more protected intersections.
Well, even for a bike like on Hover, we have a great multi-use path on the side. It's pretty wide, so there would be no need for on-street bike lanes, and that would be ridiculous for the speed of traffic anyways. So
yeah, I wouldn't want to ride a bike on that either.
I just want to see more actual clear design standards, so that we have something to work towards over the next 30 years. But then also, I do want to say that, the entrance to like a Home Depot, where there is that driveway to get into the Home Depot, and there's been numerous accidents coming out of that drive for people trying to turn left, and then now that's been built out and restricted, so you can't turn left. That's a great fix, and that was, probably a lot quicker than redesigning the whole street. So, or road, whatever, Strode, yeah. And so that's another thing I want to hear is what can we do in the meantime? Like, because the design standards, we need to actually pressure that to, I think, have a better vision for what 30 years from now looks like. That is exactly what how the Netherlands have done it. They have strict design standards, and then within 30, 40 years, they have a great network.
Yeah, and that's part of the Vision Zero action plan. We can go in and close all the access to the city.
Right.
The biggest thing we're really fighting against, or not really want to fight against, but want to get all inputs in, because it does affect people's commutes, it affects people's livelihoods for the business owners. So we want to bring everyone to the table and talk about what issues they have with their own accesses, how they think it'll affect their businesses, and try to find a good middle ground where we can reduce those accesses, improve safety, but also keep our business sector happy and be able to let people easily get to their areas and shop, whether that's on a bike, walking, or in a car.
Right. So in the short term, what I'm hearing is, adjusting how the lights function, and for ped or bike. Also maybe restricting, at least it wasn't mentioned, but also maybe restricting left turns, to make it a protected left turn only, in my opinion, for most places, and then it's just green or red. Also probably restrict right turns where it's a red arrow. Will most people follow it? Maybe.
What is the rule on the red arrow? Do you have to stop and then proceed, or do you have to wait till it's green?
You have to wait till it's green.
It's a red light.
But I experienced that downtown walking all the time. I was nearly hit yesterday, Sunday. I was also nearly hit today, from just drivers not following. Can't turn right when there's a pedestrian there.
Yeah.
So, but maybe a visual of a red arrow could help. And I think that would also increase our chances of maybe eventually making citywide no right turn on red.
I would love to see that.
I would also like to see that.
But these are things that like, how can we get these things done? The design standards is going to take years and decades. The what can we do in the short term?
Yeah, and staff right now is looking at our design standards, our street drainage, sidewalk, as well as review standards right now. And part of that is incorporating Vision Zero philosophies into it from the get-go. And then as we get the action plan, develop our plan more, it'll kind of be a living document of how we update with the needs of the city. And as new technologies emerge, we can implement those a lot easier. And you won't see a lot of stuff in the background, but our Coffin project is a good example still of things we're implementing that you may not see. We're trying out new technologies, more dynamic operations within our system to eventually have maybe more of a attention getter when it comes to different traffic operations. If a light's red, if there's a pedestrian present, if a bicycle's crossing. A lot of that stuff we're piloting in the Coffin project, and we want to eventually bring that to the rest of the system. When we have an action plan ready and can dedicate that funding to educate drivers, pedestrians, how to use our system, and then follow up with community engagement and even traffic enforcement to reiterate the laws.
I have a quick follow-up about your proposal. Do our cabinets have enough capacity? Because I know a couple meetings ago you said some of our cabinets don't have capacity and you have to be creative about how to make some improvements. So do the newer equipments have additional capacity where you can add protected left turns or protected right turns? Is there enough capacity in the cabinets?
Yeah, there's capacity for those type of operations. It's just, it would take some mostly funding and person capital to get those changes made. But our counties can do those changes. It's just having the funding and availability to get that work done with our existing workload.
Sure.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
How much will that be? How much is it to make those changes?
Depending on the signal and how it's existing configured, and if there's no problems with the underground utilities, it can range from anywhere from about $20,000 to $100,000 per signal.
Okay. How many signals do we have?
102.
Okay.
Soon to be 103.
103 times 20 to 100,000.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could target like the main 5 or 6 that have the most problems first, and then work your way down the list.
We have been upgrading certain signals, but it's definitely it comes to our existing funding and staff availability to make those changes.
Yeah, it seems like you could at least make those changes at the top 3 spots in town, and have no turn on red ever, only protected left ever.
Yeah, some of the right turn on red. We'd like to see some more infrastructure improvements before we implement those, just for compliance. You can put up a sign that says no right turn on red, but if you're on the compliance, like the no right turn on when pedestrians are present, it's kind of a wash when it comes to locking our resources. So we'd like to see some overarching improvements to catch people's eyes and really hammer home that we want people to not turn right when there's pedestrian present to improve safety.
But a red arrow could potentially reduce that number by 50%, potentially, because it's red, it's visual.
Yeah.
People generally obey red lights,
Generally. We look at traffic quite a bit, so we see a lot of not great behavior, unfortunately. And when we do make these changes, we'd rather have that systematic approach instead of picking spots here and there where sometimes you can turn right on red, sometimes you can't, and we're very consistent about our approach. You have drivers who either don't do it, and then it creates the person behind them road raging, or they just don't notice the changes. So when we do these changes, we'd like to do a full systematic approach and have one sweeping change versus spot changes in various areas.
But if it saves lives, surely it's worth just doing the spots.
Yeah, no, we're not dying. We want to improve safety. It's being able to prioritize that work and keep up with our current existing workload to improve safety as well. We have several CIP projects, design projects, and as well as just maintenance duties that our staff has to keep up on to keep the city running. So you may not see that right now, but we have several projects in the works that will address many intersections in the very near future.
And one more question, and then I'll leave it, at least for now. Question on kind of Hover as an example. What would be your all's opinion of trees along the side. So like there are some existing trees. I know in the past a car has hit a time or two, some of them. But also I see that tree is also protecting potentially a vulnerable user who's on the pathway. So is there at all an opinion, because I know some old school thinking was, you know, you want a clear zone so that the car could keep going and then they don't damage themselves. But what do we choose as what our priority is?
So I know through the development of the action plan process itself, sustainability and us are already working together on how can we align with their heat index and how can we use green design to help meet multiple needs without creating another problem for another need, right? You know, we don't want to create site distance issues, but if we can tackle, obviously, traffic calming, heat canopy, you know, whatever, it might just be greater aesthetic, you know, places for island refugees or medians, you know, all these things kind of all at once. So we're going to hopefully be able to bring that forward in the action plan, as well as how can we align those green standards, heat standards, transportation road design standards, all to make it easier, like Kyle said, to say yes to these kinds of projects quicker, faster moving forward. So we're already talking about it internally. It just hasn't made it to the policy change level yet, but that's what we're working on so we can bring it to the policy change level.
Okay.
The city does have
In
an
progress.
arborist as well.
In
and
progress.
you do see a lot of new tree plantings or the tree bags around the city as they're trying to plant new trees, establish them. So we definitely bring up Overstreet and some of the missing areas. But you do run some issues with, we were talking about site distance. Knife and Pace is a great example of those little side neighborhoods where you're trying to pull out and look down and all the trees are blocking the sight lines. So as we're planting new trees, we want to be conscious of keeping sight distance for both pedestrians and bicyclists, because as you get more clutter in the road, there's more chances for obstructing views. So,
Right. Well, the sight distance is ruined in downtown just by parked cars. So
yes,
you know,
yeah, and that's something we're looking at too during Vision Zero, is to make that consistent change and equitable as well. So we don't want to be punishing one area of the town because it allows voices there. We want to have something that's very consistent across the board.
Okay, so looking at the high accident heat map, I've noticed that most of that tends to be a mile to 2 miles from downtown, sometimes a little further than that. But like you can see downtown is sort of like this area that doesn't have like the bright hot spots, right? It's got some problems, but I'd say, you know, Manning Ken Pratt is probably our biggest, as well as up at 66, Highway 66 in Maine. Would you say that, you know, most of our strokes do tend to be in that area, a little bit further from downtown? Sort of like, you know, places that were built, you know, after or like post-war, but aren't.
I would not. I would not say that the area of 287 Main Street in downtown, from 3rd Avenue to 6th or
I think
would be
downtown
considered a
isn't,
stroke.
Yeah.
Particularly between 3rd and 6th. Access has been limited. There really aren't any driveways.
Yeah, it's just
only
parking.
1 or 2. We've restricted left turns.
Mm-hmm.
We've provided safe access mid-block crossings, as well as signals, and those blocks are smaller.
Yeah.
So I don't know that qualifies as a stroke, in my opinion.
No.
Okay, what you're going to
further
see
out.
is south of the creek, where you have the wider roadway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where it expands to 2 to 3 lanes in each direction, center turn lane as well, and then wider lanes, much wider, and driveways everywhere.
Yeah.
And even though it's 35 miles per hour, I believe, in that area, people drive a lot faster. Did that answer where you were going with it?
I think where I was going is there like a certain like age where we see a lot of stroads in the development pattern, like a certain era of development, or is it something that we see?
Just a lot of legacy roadways of built to a certain standard, and they met the standard at the time for what was needed. But Longmont wasn't 100,000 people there,
Yeah.
and everybody was car-centric.
Yeah.
We're not anymore. So we're trying to provide facilities for all users.
Absolutely.
So
I have a question about the heat map. I don't have a laser pointer, but right below 66, I'm assuming those two blobs are 66. So there's two areas on Main Street that are not as highlighted. Main Street between 3rd and 6th. Well, what's our opinion with the heat map skipping a big chunk in North Longmont? What can we attribute to? Just get up to this area right here.
not as many accidents.
But why?
The circles are at intersections. Those are where the conflict points are.
But these are still pretty big intersections.
So maybe
Not 17th.
can I just describe what this data actually is real quick?
Sure.
And what it isn't? So what these data points represent are just crash count, right? Of just fatal or severe injury crash counts. So it's just a count. What it doesn't do, and what an analysis that we're working on right now, is to relook at this data and say, like, okay, 17th and Main, when you take all of the criteria of what 17th and Main intersection looks like, the speed limit, you know, the volume, traffic volume, all of that, and compare that intersection with all other intersections in Colorado that have the same conditions, does 17th and Main and Longmont perform worse or better?
Okay.
So kind of that level of safety is not represented in here. This is just a crash count. So it's like a starter. It's still valid data, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture of what's going on at these intersections or where they're going on. So we have to take this with, it's limited for what it is right now. It doesn't have the most current data either. We got to sort of redo this with the most current data. But it's at least giving us a starting point of where are our most severe crashes occurring without really any other understanding of what's going on behind those crashes. So
Okay.
that requires a different level of analysis, which we're doing, so we can bring that forward in the Vision Zero Action Plan development process. So just keep that in mind, that this map is not going to give us the full picture of what's going on behind the crashes.
I was just curious, is it like a speed limit change, or do we have different signaling in some of these different intersections?
When you when you think about the speed limits coming south on 287
Sure.
with the speed limits coming east and west on 66, you're going to have
Conflict.
higher conflict versus the slower speeds coming up north from 287 too. So that's one potential explanation or condition that changes depending on the lake flow.
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it just from the person that stares at traffic all day. We get a lot less conflicting movements at these areas. So if you think about the areas that we have the bright white spots, you get a lot of people going straight, you got a lot of people going left. Crisscross movement versus when you get to north of 17th between 19th, 22nd, 23rd. A lot of the movement is both directions are taking a left. Now a lot of people are going straight through to connect to adjoining neighborhoods. They're both taking left, so they're not in conflict with each other. When you get to the areas that we do have, let's say 17th, you get a lot of people going straight, you get a lot of people going left, and everyone's trying to make a move at the same time. So when we're talking about access management and reducing accesses, the best way to reduce accidents is to avoid that conflict zone. So if we look at all the areas we have, most of our hotspots are going to be areas that have a full 8-phase signal. So we have straights and we have lefts. The best way to reduce that is to reduce the possibility for those conflicts.
So are you saying the more phases, the more likelihood of accidents, or the less phases, less accidents?
Less phases. So if
Protected phases.
Or protected phases.
More protected phases.
So a change we did have at 66 and Main was reducing we're changing the left turn from a protected permissive, so flashing yellow, to just a solid red, yellow, green light, arrow light. And we have seen a steep decline in left turn accidents at that area since that change.
I think it'd be really cool to see this before and after you make changes, to see how it's like what the right mix is of changes to your phasing of pulling the different levers. How does it impact the heat map?
Yeah, and that's part of our kind of changing our signal system infrastructure. We're getting close to wrapping up that project, but it's going to give us a lot of data on how many people take left turn, what times, does it increase on certain days, certain hours, certain days of the week, so we can track that information and make changes. So if we see accidents and volume rise together, we can make those changes to our signal.
And when you make those changes, is the date notated so we can say, okay, this date, this is when those signals change, so we can look at the data?
Yeah, we can track all those changes and then compare them from before and after.
That's cool.
So I had a thought about, so of course we can't really change the state highways, they are set by the state. But we can change the access to all the businesses that run along those roads. They don't all have to have entrances from, like, say, 66, or we can change. You could change the access so it only comes from the collector roads. So there's no entrances or exits, no less driveways going in and out of 66. So you're just reducing the speeds of when people are entering, and it'll be easier to make it more accessible to vulnerable road users. So you're just taking out some access points from the super fast roads where we have a lot of conflicts, and moving people accessing those businesses to a collector road. Have you considered maybe looking at that approach?
Yeah. As Jim said, in our development review process, we've been trying our best to require closures where we can. Sometimes we come in conflicts with fire code. They have specific requirements of getting in and out, so trucks can, if there's a fire or anything like that, they can get in with any type of apparatus they might need. We do come some issues with, there's like strip mall areas off Main Street where it's pretty narrow parking lot. So for them to have parking and then sharing access is very hard and require either all the shop owners to agree on these changes, or it would require additional right-of-way.
Okay, but if you provide alternative ways of getting to those businesses without involving a car, then you won't need as many spaces for cars to park because people are going to be using their cars, right?
Yep, and that's the goal as we're doing a lot of different project changes to really think about how can we get other people in alternative ways to destinations.
So I'm just thinking, like, for example, like Safeway on 119. There's multiple ways to get into Safeway, but there is one spot where there's no light and it's just the right turn into it. You don't have to have that as an access point at all. You could just close that off and just use the lights that are already existing, or even having it coming off South Pratt, for example, and having no access coming from 119 at all. So it's all coming from the collector roads rather than having so much access coming from all different directions, having it all focused on one or two directions, so it's easier to navigate for different users. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand your point.
Yeah.
I will say it is hard to change accesses on a state highway. CDOT requires special permits and traffic studies to make that happen. We've kind of gone through that process a couple times, and it's laborious. But that's something that we have been looking into and are looking to the horizon to see if there's any possible projects that we can move forward to help reduce those accesses and point people towards more of a controlled intersection.
Which ones are you looking at?
We are looking at our high crash areas. Look on the map along 119. You can see the big bright spot. We're looking at those areas to see what can be done to reduce those types of crashes.
What about a roundabout?
Refer to the right-of-way comment. Being a state highway, we need I believe the design requirements like a 60-foot semi-truck for those requirements, and ends up being like a 300-400 foot wide roundabout. So the right-of-way take would be extensive.
Okay, but it would save lives.
You have to get that approved first.
It's still a highway that we have no control over.
Yeah,
so I mean, we could talk about this all day long. I mean, we can only do what we can do within the city. I get what you're saying. You're right. It would save lives, but if you want to, you can send some letters to CDOT and let them know what you're saying, and I'm sure they'll agree with you, but what will be the process after that? Because talking to staff, that's good, you letting them know, but I think maybe as an advisory board, you all can send a letter to CDOT.
Well, and on that note, CDOT is obviously working through updating their design standards as well with the adoption of the new State Highway Safety Improvement Plan as well with the safety. So as that comes out, it's going to make it easier for local municipalities to also then adopt what CDOT is now sort of more welcoming to and those changes, because they are looking and considering all of these things that they have previously said no to or very difficult to get a yes out of. So as the whole kind of system shifts towards a more safety-centric, human-centric, from the federal, state to local level, right, it's going to get easier to be able to, for the locals to be able to make some of these changes on the network, the state network, versus what's off the state network and more in our control. So to your point, that's going to change as well.
Are they taking public comment?
It closed already, but it was open
last week.
Yeah, let's do it.
That would have been really good, especially since they're changing.
I'll double check, but I think it just.
Do we know when they're going to complete their standards?
I'll look it up while we're chit chatting.
All right.
I guess I was making that point, like, we're never going to be able to change the fact that we have state highways going through the middle of the city. So trying to work our other roads so that there's businesses already there. They're not going to go away, and we're going to need access, but changing the way that we access those businesses, but also keeping in mind that there is a state highway and there's going to be certain speeds that are expected along those roads. If you just separate out the two different uses, then I think it would take away a lot of the conflict long term also. But yeah, that's kind of what I was.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Gina of trying to work with CDOT to reduce access points so that you actually control the traffic where it needs to be controlled. Instead of the road is more randomized in out confusion. So if CDOT is actually changing some of those standards, I think that would be a great step, hopefully.
I think that's it. They'll adopt their plan first, and then they'll work on updating the standards. And the plan was just adopted, or is about to just be adopted? I'm just looking to see if it's done or not yet. So then those design standard changes will follow. And they know that every municipality is waiting for them to do their portion of their standards, although many local municipalities are working on their design standards too, and essentially some of the locals are ahead of the game compared to the state. So, but that's going to make a difference when they finally get it done to kind of align better and make it easier for the CDOT regions to work with the local municipalities.
Do they have a draft plan then?
Yeah.
Can you send that to us?
Yes. Right. I got it open.
We expect to
Like,
see
where do I send this? What's the easiest? Send it to Stephanie. Is that the
You
easiest?
send it to me and I'll
Yes.
send it to her.
What's the best way to do it? Yes. Yes.
And so it's too late for the board to send any comments or suggestions of what they would like to see?
Well, to your point, I think what you could do is encourage them to update their design standards as soon as possible to align with the new state plan.
Right.
So it's not too late for that kind of feedback. Great, you got the plan done, we like it, or we like these parts, focus on these parts, emphasize these parts, whatever it might be. So the design standards, so it's easier for local municipalities to work with you, CDOT.
So this is
That would be a
perfect timing.
perfect opportunity.
Okay. Good to know.
I mean, I would add, there is an access control plan on Highway 66 that's active, and that has informed, development decisions. Right now, it's very early level of development as those annexations, but, it is something that comes up with those doors. They also have, part of 119 is also has an access control plan that applies to it. And that one's been in place for decades, I think, so.
I'd also suggest maybe the city think about thinking about your long-term view of the future. Do you want 119 to always be this mix, or 66 to be this mix of businesses, but sort of not business, is being straight? having a clear vision of what you want the city to have in terms of like what access will be, and then how many access points will there be on that road, and be able to like moving towards that every year, and having that clear vision like, hey, we want 119 to be just the fast through road through the city, or Main to go just be straight through north-south, and having that as your overall goal, and over time reducing the number of access points and reducing those conflict areas, and always having that kind of in the back of your mind of having the long-term vision of how you're going to separate out those two obviously very conflicting uses, speed and then access. They go together. Hopefully that makes sense.
But also 119 and 287, those are the two roads that people use when they're passing through. So
Exactly.
people who live in Weld that work in Boulder most likely are using 119 to pass through and go to Boulder. People who are going to Loveland are probably using 287 to get through. So I think as much as we want to try, we're never going to eliminate that type of road user unless we have roads that bypass the city, which I don't think they'll ever be budgeted for that. So
Or
I think
unless we have a robust transit system.
Yes. Yeah, that seems like.
But that involves RTD doing their job.
But I think that's, unfortunately, I think that might never happen because we're on the edge of RTD, unless there's a different solution than RTD, because we're at the edge of RTD, and people who are going from Weld to Boulder, that's not RTD district. People who are going to Loveland, also not RTD, but it is part of that.
But there's the Fort Collins bus, so if that could be
That's right.
better funded to be more consistent, then that could alleviate a lot of traffic.
True.
But you know, the rule of public transit is it has to be provided for people to use it. We can't wait for users to then expand service. It's like that's not how people function. It's not how we drive every day anyways.
Right.
It's like you drive when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we say bus, no, we can only take it in the morning and the evening. So
Time up your day.
yeah.
Yeah, that seems like the obvious solution to reducing all conflict is just have buses. Then there'll be less cars.
Just providing more options in general. It doesn't just have to be a bus.
That's true. Public transit. Like,
Ride Longmont.
yeah.
But
I
that's-
mean,
that's still
I
a-
think this goes back to what City Council though did adopt when they adopted Vision Zero, is say, let's kind of flip the script and say, let's focus on all multimodal users in a way that we haven't, since we've been so focused on the driver and moving traffic volume for so long. Check. That didn't necessarily help the situation. We got that, so now we need to focus on all the modes, you know, and invest in all of the modes and kind of flip the script a little bit, that it's not about traffic volume being the leading indicator of what we do or don't do anymore versus making multimodal access and connections and safe options for everybody to use, you know. So council has set a clear path for what we're all trying to work on here, so.
But by giving more options for multimodal, we are also helping the car user with less cars on the road, less conflict for cars. So it is a win for the car user as well.
Win-win, yeah.
Right.
Win-win.
Right.
so the fact that RTD is probably never going to prioritize Longmont, ever. Like, it's never going to be a priority for RTD. Unless some amazing thing happens, we're always going to be on the periphery. I think Longmont needs to think about other strategies for public transit. It can't just rely on RTD. And
Well, yeah, but we do give RTD a lot of money for what we don't get, so we do need to hold them accountable.
that's true. We give them a
Maybe
lot
we
of
need to call Channel 9 News or something.
Well, and keep in mind too, Boulder County just became their own transit agency to help all the local communities in Boulder County instead of just relying on RTD, because RTD is never going to be able to be all things to all communities. So to your point, we have to consider other strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And now that there is the partnership fund, the partnership money, the fact that they're allowed to work outside of their district or, you know, run buses outside of their boundary lines, I mean, things are they also realize they have to work in partnership with other people because they can't be seen, and it will help them and reduce their stress if they don't have to be everything to everyone. So looking at who else can become a transit agency or who else can provide transit is what definitely everyone is looking at, because RTD cannot and will never be the end-all be-all for all sort of transit options, for sure.
Yep. RTD does not operate the hop in Boulder. That's operated by the city. I think RTD manages fare collection for them, but it is not an RTD route. It is a City of Boulder route.
And so now the Gun Barrel to Boulder is also going to be a new route that's going to be managed by
Is that gonna
Boulder
be-
County. And that's why
That's
Boulder
gonna be
County
Boulder County
became a
Transit,
transit
yeah.
agency, so we could bring more of those local options to life
Yeah,
over
the
time.
first one of
and
those
not
that I-
have only RTD to work with.
The first one of those that I've noticed is that Boulder County started running a bus from Boulder to Lyons because RTD never brought that route back.
So Boulder County is recruiting for an action force
Yes.
for this.
Yeah.
Well, what they're recruiting for is an advisory committee to be a part of the Boulder County Transit Plan Advisory Committee. So that is, we're going to get language, I think, this week from them to get the word out, to help get the word out about if people want to be a part of that advisory committee.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
I thought it was not allowed that municipalities had bus routes. So how is Boulder doing their own bus routes?
They might be funding it entirely
Yeah.
to RTD, but if you go, what's really weird about HOP is it's like listed in RTD's like routes and stuff, but if you go to the schedule, it takes you to the City of Boulder website. It's
So
some weird
It's not the city,
thing.
it's the provider. So it's VIA operating their own bus service. It's not City
it's
of Boulder
operated by VIA.
operating the bus service.
Okay. Yeah.
So how do we do that in Longmont?
So-
Yeah, that's a serious question. How do we do that?
Yeah, and I think that's named in the TMP is to look at, how do we have these different partnerships, what shuttles, and that's part of what Ride Longmont is about, is where will Ride Longmont naturally help indicate where there might need to be a new fixed route option that could replace the Ride Transit, Ride Longmont, because it's going to show what are those travel patterns that really seem to be the key destinations that are getting used the most. Not that we don't have some we already have some information that show us.
So similar to this heat map, can we, with the data that we have available, can we have a map that shows lines so we can see most common routes? Is that something that we can eventually do?
For Ride Longmont?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have a heat map of like origin and destination pairs. I'm not quite sure if the operator is able to see like actual routes. They might be able to, but I've seen like heat maps with like, here are the top pickup and drop off locations. From my understanding, they're actually pretty well spread out throughout the city. So it's not really showing like one singular like route that's like, wow, this could be served by fixed route. With that being said, the program is less than 1 year old. So I think that once we hit that 1 year mark, we'll be able to have kind of more substantial data to look at with VIA transportation, separate from HOP VIA, to look at that and see what our options are. That is all data that they have on the back end. I don't have access to that, but obviously they're more than willing to like work with us and get that data. So that is something that we can do and have talked to them about.
So I think one of the most important things that we need to figure out is how people are navigating our transportation network with all modes of transportation, whether it's car or pedestrian or bike. Where are people going and what are their routes? And I know, are we going to be collecting license plate data for trying to figure out where people are using our roads, or is that not something that we'll be doing?
So it is.
Engineering does not collect license plate data.
We
No?
don't have any current efforts going on
Okay.
for that.
Yeah. The only data we collect on our intersection is based on Wi-Fi, and that's anonymized data that we don't see. So it's just tells us what percentage of trips go to each signal node, not particularly specific areas or addresses. So.
But we can follow that person, not that person, it's anonymous, but can we follow a rider through the network or not really?
No, not really.
Okay.
It's anonymized, so
Okay.
we don't really want to have a chance of singling people out. We want to look at the data on a macro level, not so much micro.
Okay.
Just for privacy, and ultimately what we're using
Oh,
data for is
yes.
just checking where people are going, what routes they're taking. So it'll give us a general overview of it. to make some decisions on that.
If I could bring it back to Strodes.
sorry.
What can we do about Strodes? On your slide, you have 4: access management, street redesign, road diets, zoning reform. What would you say is the top one you see as the most influential to change, kind of, well, increase safety, but then also increase value? So that we can afford all these projects that we, on this side of the table, want.
So I'll start at the bottom. Zoning reform is beyond this team. That would be undertaken through changes to Envision Longmont, which I believe they have been talking about updating that, originally approved 2016 or 2018.
We're in their
And they're in
10-year
that
cycle.
process of looking at that in the future. I don't know that they're looking at it in 26. I know it has been discussed that it is something that needs to be updated in the next few years. I mean, you know, some of the other items, street redesign, road diets, those are processes that they take a little bit more time, and a little bit more effort, and a little more costly. And we are undertaking some of those now with certain projects. We do undertake some road diets. It depends on the corridor and the area. Access management is stuff we're undertaking now. Okay, on any time a project comes through development review, we're looking at the corridor it's on, and looking to, no matter where it's at in the city, and see if we can consolidate access points from what was traditionally approved, particularly on Main Street. We've had 3 or 4 developments there that haven't moved forward. Probably on that corridor, about 50% of the projects that are proposed never move forward. And that's could be a number of reasons, but we usually will look at access points and, you know, either limit the access they have to meet the current criteria and meet current standards, or, you know, we're consolidating accesses. So we do undertake some of those things now. It is just not something that when you're doing it hopscotch areas all over the city, it's not immediately evident like a project, complete redesign of a street like Kaufman.
Right. So now zoning reform, like, yeah, it's not our purview here particularly, but then an example is the development that's going on north of Home Depot right now. There's going to be another traffic light installed. Who's paying for that? Is the developer, or is it partner?
The developer on that particular development, okay, that has been in the long term in our plan for that roadway connection. Okay, Mountain Brook is partially built to the west, ends at Anderson, and then was to connect through and kind of warp a little bit to the north, because so it could provide spacing, meet the spacing requirements.
Right.
As part of the annexation.
So what I'm getting at is zoning reform could potentially increase development, which then gives us a path towards, you know, not technically free infrastructure, but cheaper infrastructure that we will then maintain in the future, and then also an economic output to the city.
Okay.
So I see zoning reform as the biggest thing that we would have to do, even though it's probably the hardest one.
It's up there.
Yeah.
And again, what I say is we don't control it here. Is you know, development. We're still looking at this with development. Okay, the current standards.
Right.
There's separation of access points
Right.
and roadways.
Clover Basin, you know, that project development. There's going to be, if it passes,
If it moves
the developer
forward,
will have to pay for some.
They would have to pay for the widening of the roadway, pay for a portion of the roundabout.
Yeah.
Okay, it just depends on the development.
Yeah.
Okay, and including any development. Example I will use is currently being planned is the development, the northern end of the city, at the northern up on 287, those two empty parcels north of Walmart, both sides of the street, are looking to come in for development. Okay, they're looking to try to get another signal on 287. That would be at their expense. The city gets no benefit from that, so development.
Well, we get to have the liability and maintain it,
And we would be
rehab
responsible
it
for
when it
maintaining
needs
it
to
in
be.
the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's
So
the
it's
life
free
cycle?
to a certain point.
It is.
Yeah.
What's the life cycle of a signal before you have to?
Depends if someone hits it or not. But
Assuming
we will have signals that are 30 to 40 years old.
Oh.
So as long as the steel isn't corroded or people hit it, take out the galvanizing, graffiti it, they can last a good bit. What we're running into is a lot of them are compliant to current day standards, so we are looking at replacing, or at least have a systematic approach to replace the signals that are older, which we do have a lot of them, to new standards, and as we do make those new standards, improving the crossings and have that new technology with our signals to make crossing roads safer.
And ballpark of cost?
Right, it's rising, but we're looking at anywhere from $400,000 to $700,000 per signal, just depending on the size and work required.
Well, and is it fair to say that anytime you're ordering supplies these days, it's taking generally 6 months longer than it used to receive?
Yeah, it takes about 6 months to receive the polls.
So when you're trying to project plan what you thought it was gonna take versus what it's actually taking now just to receive the supplies, just across the supply chain for reasons we can all guess. It's taking a lot longer to just get supplies.
So when you are looking at redoing intersections and signaling, do you ever look at the amount of space that pedestrians have when they're waiting to cross?
Yep, we're looking at that, and minimally we'll meet the ADA requirements and ProRag at bare minimum, but we are looking at other ways to expand that to be more inviting for multiple people to be standing in an area, or bikes with carriages, provide that extra space where we can.
So there are a lot of quick wins that you're doing on Strode. So 119 and 287, that concrete median, also the Home Depot, no left turn. How do you determine those fixes, and where does that come from? Because it's not on a CIP.
So the island at the Home Depot, that was a requirement of the Fairgrounds Marketplace development, and had been in a requirement for that development as part of their annexation, along with the traffic signal.
So they paid.
So they paid for it and performed the work. Other work is funded through our, in some cases, TRP 11. Some areas we do it as part of TRP 1, which is asphalt management. Most of our signal work and signal maintenance is those two other projects I just listed were capital improvement programs. Most of our signal work is done through our maintenance, through our operations budget. So, overall, the city spends on roads, streets, for simply operating and maintenance, spends about $15 million a year, including TRP1. Okay, for just maintaining the system, which is in snow and ice. It's street sweeping. It is signing and marking. It is traffic signals. It's street rehabilitation. It's our pavement management. So that is approximately, in next year's budget, about 41% of our overall budget for streets. And I'll be giving an update on the street fund tomorrow night if you want to watch.
I would also add that 287 south of 119 at Grand Avenue, that was actually a CDOT project to construct that raised center median in response to high crash patterns, because there were a lot of southbound left turns onto Grand Avenue that couldn't navigate the turn across 3 lanes, and lots of cars were getting hit. So that was, they do that. That was also Main Street south of 17th, was also a CDOT initiated.
Okay. Brought up a good point. How do we get CDOT to pay for some of these improvements, since 2 of our roads are CDOT, right? Both of them are?
I'm glad you asked that question. We are currently working with CDOT they are working on intersection improvements. They are currently in design. They are going to be doing some improvements, and Kyle will correct me when I get the roadways wrong, on Main Street at 119. Minor improvements to make that some of those pedestrian islands safer. 9th and Main is another intersection where they're doing some improvements. 23rd and Main, and I want to say, is that included in those? And 17th and Main.
66.
It's not 23rd.
Not
23rd? Oh, 66.
And then Mountain View minor improvements.
And Mountain View, some minor improvements. So they are working on those. That is currently in design. We have a team together that is coordinating with CDOT on those, and that will be at CDOT's expense. So we would hopefully see those next summer. So they are, on their corridors, doing part of their fair share.
Can we see some of those plans? Sorry.
Yeah,
Well, what about 21st and Main? Because we've discussed that before.
That is currently in design.
Okay, but is
Okay.
that a CDOT funded?
That is not CDOT funded. That is going to be a city-funded project.
So
It'll
why
be a
the
CDOT
difference there?
approved.
What happens there? Why is it a city funded instead of a CDOT funded?
Because we move forward with a grant for that project.
Okay.
We received a grant for the design. It's currently unfunded for construction.
Okay.
Okay, but we're not going to.
Yeah.
We're going to be in design for another year and a half, 2 years. So we'll look ahead for that.
Yeah.
And then also, if there's an opportunity to pursue a grant for any of the construction, I think that isn't one of the projects we're looking at.
And obviously, CDOT generally looks to the municipality to take care of maintenance needs because they have no capacity to do it. If we waited for them to do it, nothing would get done, right? So there's always those maintenance agreements with CDOT about who's going to maintain it. It's always going to fall to the local municipality for the most part.
And we do have an agreement with CDOT for maintenance of the traffic signals that are on CDOT corridors. They fund a portion
That
of
are
the
within
work,
our limits.
and they're within the city limits. And then we also have, part of that is also striping contract, where we do long line striping on state roadways through a city contract, and then they will reimburse us a portion of the work.
But thanks for putting in perspective. $15 million a year, 41% of the budget. That's a lot of money.
Well, I just we all acknowledge, like, it's still a very car-centric system, right? It doesn't mean that bike lanes don't get cleared, but like, we don't have special equipment to clear bike lanes, or, it's still a very car-centric budget that's gonna have to shift over time.
Do we think that it will reduce by having a more multimodal approach, or do we think that $15 million will increase?
Like
It's a
if
little
you-
to be determined, but I'm assuming
Okay.
it'll be an increase.
Like if you have, I don't know, say 50% of those car trips then change to some other mode, bus, bike, walking, whatever it is. I assume that maintenance will be less because they're being used less, but I don't know.
But we'll still need to maintenance sidewalks better, or bike lanes better,
Yeah.
or paths better. Like, there's not gonna be necessarily reduction in maintenance, just a change in, or an additional maintenance cost, because we're maintaining more modes
Uh-huh.
instead of fewer modes.
Okay. Is it more expensive to maintain like a sidewalk than a road?
It's going to be different factors. Sidewalk is concrete, it's going to last longer than most roadways. Usually you get 50 years of life, unless you're planting trees right next to it. Oak trees.
I know. There are ways to mitigate that, I will say.
There are.
But some of these initial estimates of what it could cost us, or the numbers that we're gonna need to start considering and talking about, should come out of the Vision Zero action plan, to give us those starting numbers to actually react to.
And we can't put a number in someone's life.
Exactly.
Yeah. It seems like, going back to these 4 points here, that encouraging more development along these strips means that we kind of get free work from some of these developers, and it might make some of these projects happen sooner because the developer's paying for it rather than the city. Would that be true, would you say?
I feel like it's a slippery slope, because the more that we have them pay, the more everything else will cost. So if we're trying to get attainable affordable housing and we have, what would you say, $30,000 for a new intersection? What did you said? How much is a new?
Yeah, another zero to that.
Sorry, 30.
Yeah.
If it's $300,000 for a new intersection and we're asking all the developers to do it, they're going to use that cost, and it's going to be more expensive for them to do their project. And then we're squeezing the balloon of something else. We're becoming more expensive for the developer, who's then going to jack prices up.
And I would say unless we have a holistic approach to development by requiring mixed use, because then you have the, instead of just housing, you're also producing revenue in the long term, instead of just depending on property taxes. But
some of the challenges with that will be there's not a lot of open areas, green space development left in the city. Cities developable area is limited. We're restricted with that. There's a few more annexations, some areas north of 66 still, but most larger greenfield developments you're not going to see.
right,
Too
more
much. It's going to be a lot.
brownfield.
It's going to be more infill, and a lot of what we see in the infill is multi-use, multifamily.
Yeah.
This is where the change in parking amendment
And
gives us
Jim,
some
you
other
mentioned
opportunities.
tomorrow you're going to talk about the street tax.
I'm supposed to be talking about transportation fund.
Okay. Okay.
I have 5 slides.
All right.
I'm happy to share them with you after I do it. So.
All right. Any ideas of the encouragement of, or if council or the public would increase that 3/4 of a cent to 1 cent? Because my math says that then it would raise.
That would be a
significant amount of
discussion
money.
for next year.
Okay.
Okay, there is no longer an opportunity to put any type of referendum on the ballot
Right.
this year. Those discussions would start in January, February,
Yeah.
if that was the case.
I do want to give time, because I know you brought stuff with you.
If you'd like, if not, I can give you some examples. You guys can make notes and bring them back to a future meeting as a discussion item.
Well, we got a half hour left.
It's up to you
got
guys.
time. I've got time. I like to look at things, point up, and talk about
you
it.
brought
I'd be
them,
happy
so
to
let's.
pass them out.
Yeah.
You can share them.
Yeah, let's do
Take
that.
5-10 minutes to make some notes on them. I have some stickies and some pens. I do apologize ahead of time. Our plotter broke, so I couldn't bring a big roll plot. I had to print them out the biggest I could. And I created 2 copies of each. They're labeled. There is, I do have two sets from 3rd Avenue from different locations. And the reason why we didn't talk about 3rd Avenue kind of as a stroad, but I think it's a roadway we can look at as a future opportunity from Martin Street to the west, going into the east side of town. Okay, it's 5 lanes, center turn lane. It's got parking on the outside, but to the east we put in bike lanes. Okay, east of Martin. So right now we have bike lanes that basically end. If you're on 3rd, we have a widened shoulder. So I added that in.
This is the council one.
All right.
Yeah.
Getting back on
6
track.
hours.
Any action items? I see none. So, is that correct? No action items. Very quick comments from the board. If you want to go first.
Well, I enjoyed this process. I think hopefully it was helpful for staff to have a bit more of a 2-way discussion, a little bit faster too than one comment. Anyway, so I appreciate doing this today. I don't know. I don't have any other comments, I guess. I'm glad that we sat down and did this. I would love to do this again and spend more hours looking at it, because I feel like we could talk about it for a long time. So yeah, let's do this again.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun. The kind of one follow-up idea or question I have is kind of related to, how can we, what I want staff to always think about is how can we have quick wins? So those, like the new detour on North Side Boston to kind of circumvent the river project now. Is like how can we have these quick wins to promote safety, but then also how do we fund it? So whether that's plastic bollards in Denver. They're doing more robust bollards than what we have. My brother has seen them get run over by a fire truck and they pop right back up. So just that's what I want the city to think is what can we do in the short term, and then what should we work towards in the long term.
I may be wrong, but I do think Denver's participating in one of the MUTCD like studies of like new bollard types to see, because so many people are running into the maintenance issues of now having to maintenance the bollards that get destroyed. So I think Denver might be participating in one of those studies with some of the newer
and
more advanced
you know,
ones. But
and in my brother's neighborhood, they do little bump outs with bollards, so it reduces so the pet can get into the street and actually see beyond the parked cars. However, maintenance issue pops up is now there's debris, so then it causes a question of how do you clean that up. Luckily, Cap Hill, people just kind of take it upon themselves and do it themselves. But in Longmont, it depends on location. Just as that North Boston stretch is filled with gravel, and we don't have a small street sweeper to kind of fit between. So we have to think about our future maintenance obligations and equipment.
Thanks for putting this together. Thanks for having that presentation to make sure we're all talking about the same thing today. Had a great time, and I think I heard someone at some point say something about maybe doing a roundabouts and traffic circles study session.
Maybe that was me.
I really appreciated this. Thanks for providing some insight on how much everything costs, because we have a lot of lofty ideas, and it's nice to know how much things actually cost, because especially in this cycle we have limited money. So using CDOT's money to do some of these improvements is, I applaud you all for getting that done. So thanks for thinking creatively on using other people's money. Because money is tight these days, so appreciate that. Thanks for this. This was a lot of fun to really understand, because we're all users of these roads, but when you look at it from the top down, it's easier to understand how things can kind of intersect with each other, pun intended. So thanks for doing this. I know this is not normal for our meeting, and it required some additional work, so thank you for doing that. That's all I have. Gina, do you have more?
Oh, Taylor reminded me about what's going on with Boston. So the bollards that are now in the bike lane, they have made the bike lane super narrow, and I can barely fit through with my bike. Like, I'm hitting the bollards because it's so narrow. Because the bollards are placed inside the bike lane, so it's made the bike lane extra narrow, especially when you get to the intersection at sunset. It's maybe 3 feet at max, but I'm in the gutter, balancing, trying to get through. So it's made it really narrow. And now that the bollards have been there for a few weeks, there's a lot of debris in that area. A lot of debris, and I keep getting moving around because of all the rocks in that area. So I know that we talked about this last month about extra sweeping, but with the bollards now in the way, how is that happening? Because right now it doesn't seem like there's being very swept, and it's just
a sweeper can't fit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's an issue. If you want bikes to be able to using that lane, you need to keep it swept, but then don't have the.
I will make a note that Parks does have Kubotas that have sweeping attachments that could push debris away.
There's any number of pieces of equipment we can look at that. Our operations team has a schedule of trying to sweep arterials and collectors at least once a month. I think we talked about some of the downtown area doing it twice a month.
Yeah.
I'll talk to them about both the bollard placement and the sweeping. I was led to believe that the bollards were placed on the stripe line so that there was.
Nope.
So I'll have to take a look at it. I've not gotten out there to drive by it, but I don't look that closely. So we'll take a look at it and see if we can make any adjustments. And then we'll also talk about what we can do about accelerating or ramping up the street sweeping in that area. It is pretty nasty, mostly because of color and materials. So, but certainly we'll talk to our operations guys about it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, this was really good, really informational, and I mean, when y'all were doing work, I was talking, so. But talking transportation, I just want to say that next month will be the last month that I will be able to go to the council at the market. What we do is take down information from people who have suggestions, comments, complaints, and this past Saturday I was there and I got a lot of complaints or a lot of suggestions, a lot of talk about bike lanes. So, you know, people were complaining a lot about the bike lanes, those lack thereof, and I actually have that in my truck too. I wasn't thinking. But a lot of people on this past Saturday were talking a lot about transportation and issues and things. So, and I invited people to attend the task force for Vision Zero. So, Cammie, if there's something that I can get, because we do have one more on Saturday. Next month, it's the last one that council will be at the market. But to be able to, we have so many people come to the table and talk to us.
I'll make sure Dylan can get you all the flyer for the upcoming task force meeting, so you just have it on hand to hand out, which is bilingual. So
that would be perfect. That would be perfect.
And then that way you all have it.
Yeah, because they start not only talking about bike lanes, then they start talking about the different roads, kind of like what you all talk about here. And I'm like, we always have people looking for people on the board. You will be great on the board. So that's a great opportunity if anyone from staff would like to come for the next month to kind of talk to people and hear their ideas and things like that, as well as giving me something to pass out to people or hand out to them so that they know that we are doing things. But for the most part, people are very pleased, besides they say overgrowth, and they keep saying that they don't want us to be Boulder, but yet these are people who move from Boulder. And so that's what I have to deal with.
Well, thank you for talking to them about it. And
Absolutely.
Working on it, giving them that avenue to connect.
Yes. So if I can get that for at least for October, then that would be amazing.
Definitely.
And one final comment, since you kind of brought it up, we do have 2 empty seats for whoever's watching out there. Applications should be opening today for boards, correct? For openings.
What are you looking at?
We have 2 open spots. The city did open up the application process to get on board. So whoever's out there and interested in transportation, we have 2 seats. One's for you. Apply, please. Yes.
Yeah, I told several people on Saturday. So
thank you. Thank you for being an advocate. All right. And if that's it, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you all.